All the way from Chapin Camden, the heart of the Cotswold. We are going to speak to, let's say we are on a great journey here. We are going to explore the importance of creativity, how to work with it, and how to inspire our children in schools and in other areas with more creativity. Ali, could you please introduce yourself and what do you do for business?
Okay, I'm Ali Rice. I actually trained as an artist, and then I set up my business 31 years ago. And basically, I was a fine artist, but I was determined to prove that arts and creativity made a difference, and that's what I've done in the last 30 years. And essentially, basically, I think creativity engages and inspires children, and if they go through a creative process, they're so engaged they don't realize they're working. So essentially that's kind of fundamental to what we've done, and we've kind of evolved over the years. So initially we used to do large scale murals and outdoor spaces, and then we progressed to film and animation. And essentially what's happened is if you give them the responsibility to do creative research, they're much more invested in what they do. Or there's other situations when we've worked in poorer areas where children design benches or murals, or so that they have ownership of the place and they start taking care of the community that they live in. So I think creativity kind of fires up and engages children in a really unique way. So yeah.
And what inspired you like to start on this on these projects?
I think initially because I used to work in California for 10 years. So I used to work in the wilderness and I used to run arts and outdoor programs. So I think creativity was essentially key to all of the projects that we did there. We used to do overnights, and we used to explore Yosemite, and essentially it used to embed creativity in the children. So there wasn't any technology and there was no TV. So essentially they had to cook for themselves. They'd kind of create their own theatre productions. They'd horsepack through Yosemite, or, but essentially they'd canoe and go overnight on an island in the middle of an area where there were bears and snakes. And, so it was kind of, I always call it the renegade years, actually, because the first year I went there, I was only 21. And it was fundamentally life-changing, and it still never left me. So that kind of sense of adventure and exploration into the unknown is really what creativity is. So obviously the kind of physical trip to the States kind of enabled me to have that exploration and meet people that were from all over the world. So one of my best friends still lives in Moscow. Another friend was from Nairobi and now lives in the States. But it really extended my network to kind of loads of my closest friends live across the globe. They don't necessarily live in the UK. So, and even my twin sister lives over in Texas. So yeah, it's been really interesting. But I think that exploring the unknown is really key to creativity. And that's where the magic is, not knowing what's going to happen and kind of almost creating the opportunities to kind of move forward. So yeah.
So my question here, is creativity important to life?
Yeah, I think especially in education, I think one of the things that's fundamental to, I've worked in the education system since I was 21, and now I turned 53 at the beginning of May. And I think what's happened is that particularly in primary schools, there's lots of children that are becoming quite disengaged. And I think because technology has come into force, we're still kind of teaching the way we used to, and children need to engage and be part of the process instead of being just taught. So I think when we were growing up, teachers really kind of had a kind of black and white way of teaching. And now it's much more about, children's kind of interaction and kind of understanding why things, what the purpose is behind the maths that you do, or essentially what we used to do in the creative learning projects actually is we used to actually demonstrate how they could work with whatever the subject was. So it had a purpose and it had context. And I think that's what's key, because then kids, or if you come from, when we do animations, if children actually make something, they've already invested, into that character, and then they research. We did a Season Oceans animation, and the children chose their own creature, made it from plasticine, and then brought it to life, so it's animated. And then we used Google Earth as well, but they did all the research was done by each individual child. And at the end, you had a composite picture that the children had made together, but each character was an animal from a certain part of the globe. And I think it's in that way, they have kind of an individual journey and a shared journey that brings everything together. And that's the thing, is that they, you should have seen what they did. And the children that did that animation were just on the brink of writing, so that, that they still couldn't necessarily put a whole sentence on a page, but they brought this amazing kind of animation to life. And that was the only thing that was missing, is there was no killing. So predators didn't kill anything and there was no blood. But the way that they did it was just stunning. And lots of children haven't traveled around the world. So essentially the Google Earth enabled children to see where their own country was and where other places in the world were and where those animals were found. So I think it was a really enlightening project, really. And that kind of set us on a mission to do a much bigger global project as well. So yeah, that's kind of our long-term goal. So yeah.
That is awesome. So my question here, like, how do you differentiate between art and creativity? Like, aren't they the same thing?
No, I actually think you can be a creative artist and you can be an artist that's not creative, which sounds a bit weird, but I think art essentially is almost, I actually believe there's natural gifts and talents. So, and obviously I was always earmarked as a good artist since I was a little girl, and I always drew and loved it. But I think that creativity is much more about applying the art and maybe problem solving. And, so we've done lots of design projects as well. And that entails kind of answering a brief and kind of having objectives to meet. And so essentially, whereas the art, to a certain extent, is open to interpretation and doesn't have the same boundaries, it's not necessarily set to achieve any goals and objectives. And I think art as well, to a certain extent, kind of comes from the soul. It's kind of, it's not one of the things actually that I'm really, really insistent on, that art and creativity isn't this kind of decorative, unthinking, insubstantial thing. It's actually key to our thinking. And if you look at children, you can trace their development on the way that they draw. So so it's much more about how they think, and so just how they're making connections with everything. So yeah, so essentially I think the art's probably more of a process, and creativity is using your imagination, and sometimes it's applying that imagination to problem solve or kind of figure out something that's going to aesthetically look good. But I think that there's much more to art and creativity than just so if you look at people like Da Vinci and Michelangelo, they were ahead of their time, and it's kind of, it's basically, I think there is definitely a crossover there. So I think that the one of the most universal things that people can understand is symbols and symbolism. And I think it kind of translates from there, though. So it's a great way of universalizing a message. So animation's one of the few things, and short films are one of the few things that translate and can be understood without any sound or language. So I think it's exciting because it's an area where everybody, to a certain extent, can understand what's going on. And there's fundamental human commonality, isn't there? So yeah, even though culturally we're so diverse. So yeah.
So let me ask you this question here. Like, how can people, or how would you advise people to see things in a different way?
Okay, so at the moment, one of the quotes that's got me through all the lockdowns since, because it's a year since we got locked down in the UK, is that uncertainty is the most fertile ground for creativity. And that's Deepak Chopra's quote. But I extended it so it was the most fertile ground for inspiration, imagination, and innovation. And essentially, my viewpoint, actually, since all this has happened, is that the systems weren't sustainable that all of us were living under. And essentially we had to change. And I think the COVID situation has forced us into reconnecting and re-examining what we're doing, because we're not living sustainably as a race. So, climate change comes in there. So there's enough food in the world for everyone, but there's a distribution problem. So essentially the West is is quite kind of governed by greed and capitalism and, you know, the materialism, and there has to be something that levels everyone off so that everybody can kind of sustain their lives, really. So I think it's so for me, the uncertainty, what's really weird actually is because I've always worked using the creative process, what's happened didn't really scare me. And I think what's happened is the mass media keep trying to push this fear. And the thing is that if you constantly live in fear, you get stuck and you can't do anything. And it also affects your immune system as well. So I think creativity enables, I do yoga as well, but I think staying in the moment so that you're quite grounded as well is really important. And I think that's the thing, is that the creative process essentially gives you an opportunity to almost kind of connect to the universal, you know, the wisdom or the source, or, you know, that there's some kind of, you know, it's a kind of commune that comes with the creative process. So essentially, and I think artists are definitely tend to be quite non-conformist, and, you know, just tend to, for me, my kind of whole reason to be is to inspire people and create positive change to try and fix, you know, we've worked in arts and health, we've worked in arts and the environment too, and primarily in arts and education. And I'm part of the Royal Society of Arts as well. So essentially, it's basically catalyzing change, but through creativity, so that, you know, it has a bigger impact. So, yeah.
So my question is, like, how does not knowing or uncertainty affect creativity?
Well, so I think the thing is, until you get inspired, you don't know what you're doing. And so definitely if you're co-creating as well, the whole point of the creative process is to still see where it takes you. And essentially what's happened, I actually believe that we were always co-creating our kind of own destiny and our own lives. But it wasn't until COVID happened that we realized that, you know, when things came to a stop, that we realized that we did have a bit more control than we thought we did. And essentially the people that have managed to stay quite positive through it have tended to, so I've been part of a big, I'm part of Genius U. So I was given Social Entrepreneur of 2013 by Roger Hamilton. And there's a network of entrepreneurs that I've been working with throughout the lockdowns. And that's been creative based as well. But I think some businesses have managed to pivot very easily online, and some schools have as well. But I think that kind of pivot has actually made us realize that there's greater possibilities, but it's only because we were stopped from doing things as we normally did that we realized that there were other possibilities. So essentially, if you look at it positively, it's created a space that some of us didn't realize was there. And obviously I wouldn't be talking to you without lockdown and connecting, you know, it's kind of, so essentially, if you look at it in a positive way, there's lots of opportunities that opened up. And essentially, the obstacles sometimes provide those opportunities. So I think it's, you know, people have to be agile and kind of work differently if that's the way things are. So, and obviously, it's, you know, I know people that home lives have changed because their husband spends more time at home. One of my friends has got a husband that's an engineer, and he does a lot of work on site, but when he's not at work now, he doesn't go to an office, he's at home with his children. And it's kind of addressed the work-life balance, so it's given them more balance and more time with him. So there's good stories as well as bad things that have come. And the media tends to promote all the, you know, give you all the bad stuff instead of, so yeah, I think it's, and obviously, it's a fuel of, you know, it fuels me with positivity so that I can kind of keep quite upbeat and support my children as well. Because I think definitely the mental health of what's happened has affected our young people and everybody in the situation. So I think it's, and my husband actually, he's part of the business as well. He's an ex-psychiatric nurse as well. And he always used to work with the creative process too. But I think fundamentally, there's kind of a crossover between that kind of creativity and support. So essentially, if you're in the moment or you don't get anxiety and it's just worrying about what might happen in the future or carrying around the past that kind of keeps you stuck or, you know, or stressed. So I think it's creativity is just a really good, if nothing else, it's quite a good way of therapeutically relieving that tension and giving that energy to something that's got a positive outcome. So yeah.
So, and how to, let's say, apply or how to make use of our knowledge and our skills?
Yeah, well, I think my theory is actually that everybody's got gifts and talents. So the genius you, and essentially, if you can identify what those gifts and talents are and utilize them, that's why you're here. So essentially, so my view is that children should follow their passions, and that in turn will enable them to be of service to themselves and the people around them. So I think that, I truly believe we're part of this integrated piece, and that we're really much more powerful than we realize we are. So it's kind of, and there's so many people that do jobs that they don't like. And I think the fact is that if you do what you love, even if you have a bad day, you're still compelled to come back and keep doing it. So yeah, so it's but when I was growing up, my dad used to say, "Oh, forget about the art and do something," so he used to think it would just be a hobby and it would never go anywhere or have any impact or do anything. So yeah, but things have changed. The creative industry is one of our biggest exports from the UK, and we make a big dent. And even though we're a small country, we make a big dent in the world for music and film. And it's kind of, so yeah. Lord David Putnam, actually, who's the film director, has also had a couple of meetings with us and brokered relationships for us as well. And his kind of key mission is for education and the environment too. So it's quite interesting how you can use the arts and creativity to create change. There's another really incredible guy that died a few years ago called David Shepherd, and he was a wildlife artist. But his Wildlife Artist Foundation still funds people to protect animals in the wild. So he protects elephants in Africa and snow leopards, and his legacy lives on even though he died a few years ago. So I think arts and conservation just has an incredible impact and raises awareness. And so I think, definitely for me, arts and creativity marry, but I'm naturally an artist. So I naturally write poetry, and, it's kind of, so I naturally always engage with the world in an artistic way. And I love beauty, nature's beauty, and always tend to see the beauty in things as opposed to, so it's kind of, yeah. So I'm just naturally, I've got that kind of natural disposition, really, which helps when things aren't so easy. So yeah.
So Ali, what would you like to say to, let's say, the other creators or the other artists?
Yeah, also my biggest kind of advice would be to go for your dreams and network with the people that are doing whatever you want to do already, so that I think most people want to share their advice and their knowledge. So essentially connect. And I don't think anyone's had the same access as we have now. So, so I've managed to connect with the David Shepherd that I mentioned, that's the wildlife artist, was one of my favorite artists when I was 21. And he became a friend, and my son won competitions with his organization as well. So my son became a mascot for his organization. And his first prize he got when he was only 4 years old as well. So he actually changed the age range that they used to run the kind of global competition, because they realized that even little children that were under 5 could still do something that was amazing and creative. So I think you should go for your dreams, and we encourage our own children to do that too. So I think it's kind of, whatever you're passionate about fires you up, so you'll make a way through, essentially. So I think that's key, and networking is massively key. Connecting and having mentors that you can learn from. And then, as definitely for me, life has a funny way of leading you to where you need to go. So the genius you and the all the kind of profiling has been kind of key to how I network and what happens, essentially. So, but definitely it's making those connections and not being afraid to put yourself out there. And I remember when I set my business up, actually, I met a guy that was he ran a sign business, because I used to do logos and kind of graphic design initially. And he said, what you should do, Ali, is not be afraid to actually connect with the big guys that are making a big impact. Don't just think that because you're as either just an entrepreneur or on your own, or you've got a small business, that you shouldn't be afraid to kind of to connect and make proposals with bigger people. And the thing is that even if you just connect with people, it's worth staying in touch and maintaining connection as well, because they'll remember you. So I think it's, you know, showing that enthusiasm and passion for what you do is really important. So yeah, I think that would be, but essentially I think in this day and age, as we move forward, being creative and versatile is going to be key strengths for whatever our generation of children go on to do. So I think, you know, and I think most jobs won't necessarily be jobs for life. Most of them will be contracts, and, you know, so essentially I think the whole world of work is going to change. So, and most of the jobs that our children do probably don't exist, you know, at the moment. So essentially, you know, I think what's going to happen is we'll probably reimagine how everybody works, and, you know, so I think and to a certain extent we're all co-creating that future, whether we're conscious of it or not. So essentially what we do now does make a difference, and individually we can change things. But the thing is, if there's so much apathy that people feel like they just need to let everyone else make decisions, then those decisions will be made around them. So essentially, you know, things, and definitely in education there's room for change, and there has been for a long time. So COVID's kind of shifted that kind of online aspect of things. And the children that my children go to Chipping Campden School, which is one of the best schools in the country, and they already had an iPad program that was pushing creative learning and interaction. So when COVID happened, they were already set up to shift online, so they seamlessly shifted. And their head teacher is just incredible. But there's all the way through the lockdown, the school's been building a brand new art centre so they can do performance. So what's really interesting is, as good as they are in academia, their focus is still on creativity and the arts as well, because they know how powerful it is to bring the community together and let children express themselves and, you know, have the opportunities to do what they do. So no, it's really interesting. So I think it's one of those things that we need to open everyone up to creativity. So instead of contracting inside themselves, they expand and realize where the possibilities are. So yeah, I think that's kind of key. Did I answer the question properly?
I think it has been awesome talking to you, Ali, today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for that indeed.
Oh, thank you, anytime.